At our 7th anniversary party with 100 pairs of eyes on us, my husband raised his champagne flute, looked directly at me, and said the words that detonated my world. Clara, I wish we'd never met. In the crushing silence that followed, something inside of me fractured. But the next morning, I didn't scream or cry. I packed up the truth, drained the bank accounts, put the house on the market, and vanished without a trace. Julian, my husband, uttered those words into a microphone, his voice unnervingly calm and deliberate, ensuring every single guest at the opulent Cypress Point Manor heard him with perfect clarity. The string quartet faltered into silence. Waitstaff froze, mid-pour. A sea of faces, a mix of our friends, family, and his business associates, pivoted towards us. Their expressions a kaleidoscope of shock, pity, and a few glints of poorly hidden glee. I just stood there, frozen in a silver gown that had cost more than my first car, my professionally applied makeup suddenly feeling like a useless mask. I tried to make sense of it. This wasn't a man crumbling under pressure. This was a performance, executed with chilling precision for a hand-picked audience. Julian coolly handed the microphone back to a shell-shocked event planner and stepped off the small, elevated stage we'd had set up for toasts. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea, and he walked out, leaving me alone in the smoking ruins of what I thought was my life. That night, I went back to our cavernous house. He never came home. There was no text, no call, not a single word of explanation, just a profound, deafening silence. I sat at the massive marble island in our designer kitchen, in the dark, and allowed myself to think with a lucidity I hadn't felt in years. People don't publicly execute their spouses without a very specific reason. They do it when they need an audience, when they're constructing a narrative for something much larger, much uglier. By dawn, the shards of my heart had solidified into something cold, hard, and far more useful. I called my college friend, Olivia, now a ruthless divorce attorney, and said 4 words that would ignite a war Julian never saw coming. I need to see everything. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to say thank you for being here as we explore these stories of resilience and survival. If you believe that discovering the truth and fighting for justice is important, please consider subscribing to our channel. It's completely free, and it helps us bring these powerful narratives to more people who need to hear them. Now let's get back to the story, but to really grasp how I ended up there, sitting in my kitchen at sunrise making a choice that would redefine my future, you have to understand where it all began. 7 years prior, I could never have pictured this life, or this cataclysmic ending. I'd met Julian Morgan at a fundraising gala for a children's art foundation. It was one of those stuffy, high society events where local titans of industry write large checks to feel virtuous for an evening. I'd only gone because my college roommate, Sophie, had practically dragged me there, insisting I needed to get back out there after a bad breakup had left my self-esteem in tatters. It had made me wonder if I'd ever meet a man who saw my career as a school counselor as anything more than a quaint hobby, something to do until I married well and started a family. Julian was different, or at least, that's the illusion he projected. He was the keynote speaker that night, discussing urban revitalization and the importance of community spaces with a fiery passion that felt utterly authentic. He spoke about how vibrant communities depended on strong schools, how the well-being of children was the bedrock of everything he aimed to achieve in his work. When he found me later at the reception and asked about my job, he genuinely listened. His eyes didn't dart around the room, scanning for someone more important. He didn't glance at his watch or cut me off. He looked at me as if I was the most fascinating person there. And after years of feeling overlooked, his undivided attention felt like a lifeline. In less than 3 months, we were inseparable. Julian would appear at my small apartment after his grueling days at his property investment firm, armed with takeout from some new restaurant he'd discovered and weaving tales of zoning disputes and difficult investors that he somehow made captivating. In return, I'd tell him about my students, The quiet boy who'd finally found the courage to speak up in group sessions, the teenage girl whose parents' bitter divorce left her feeling lost, and how I was trying to give her a sense of stability when her world was falling apart. He told me I grounded him. He said my work was a constant reminder of why his own efforts mattered, that my compassion for kids who weren't even mine inspired him to be a better man. When he proposed one lazy Sunday morning over coffee on my tiny apartment balcony, he didn't even have a ring because he wanted me to choose one I would truly love. I said yes instantly. My father had died in a car crash when I was a teenager, a tragedy that still felt dreamlike and distant, so it was my uncle who walked me down the aisle of my childhood church. The ceremony was small and intimate, just our closest family and friends, a universe away from the grand, hollow spectacle our 7th anniversary would become. Julian vowed to give me a life of stability, partnership, and unwavering honesty. I believed him, because up until that point, he had given me no reason to doubt a single word. Those initial years felt so real, I can barely access the memory of them now without a pang of disbelief. We lived in a charming, slightly too small townhouse in Savannah's historic district. It was close enough to my school that I could walk on sunny days, a simple pleasure that saved money and kept me grounded. Julian was just starting to build his investment firm from the ground up, putting in long hours but always making time for our Sunday morning ritual on the porch, reading the paper in comfortable silence. We ate simple meals at our worn wooden table, actually talking about our days, our minor triumphs, our shared frustrations. I remember laughing until I cried at his clumsy attempts to cook pasta. I remember him staying up late with me, helping me sort through student files at the kitchen table. I remember the unshakable feeling that we were a team, partners building something real and meaningful together. But by our 7th anniversary, everything had shifted, so incrementally that I didn't see the danger until I was already submerged. Julian's firm had exploded. What began as flipping small residential homes for young families had morphed into massive commercial developments backed by powerful investors whose names I only knew from the business pages. The money wasn't just flowing in, it was a deluge, and with it came a lifestyle I had never wanted but gradually accepted, because to refuse it felt like ingratitude. We moved from our cozy townhouse to a 5-bedroom, modern, minimalist mansion that Julian insisted was necessary for entertaining the kind of clients who expected a certain level of opulence. The house was stunning but sterile, filled with cavernous rooms we never entered, and furniture that screamed its price tag but offered no comfort. It had been selected by an interior designer who would ask for my input as a formality, before doing exactly what she'd planned all along. I missed our old house, with an ache I never admitted, not even to Sophie. I missed walking to the corner bakery where the owner knew my name. I missed the easy camaraderie of our old neighbors, who'd wave from their porches and share produce from their gardens. I missed the sheer simplicity of a life where I knew my place and felt capable within it. My mother visited often, her eyes wide with awe, always remarking on how wonderfully Julian was providing for me, how incredibly fortunate I was to have landed such an ambitious, adoring man. She'd glide through the house, touching the cold marble countertops as if she were in a museum, whispering that my father would have been so proud to see me so secure. Sophie would fly in from New York a few times a year and tease me about marrying up, but her jokes were always tinged with an unreadable emotion. Was it envy? Or was it concern? I never dared to ask, terrified she might voice the suspicion growing in my own heart that I had lost myself somewhere between Clara Vance and Clara Morgan. I felt like an actress playing a supporting role in someone else's blockbuster film. I'd attend charity galas in dresses I loathed, forcing a smile for photographers next to people whose names evaporated from my memory the moment I heard them. I'd make hollow small talk about stock portfolios and European vacations, all the while screaming on the inside, wondering if anyone else at these glittering events felt as fraudulent as I did. but I rationalized it. This was just what happened when a marriage evolved, I told myself. This was a normal period of adjustment. I was being selfish, ungrateful, for missing our old life when this new one was something so many people dreamed of. So I taught myself to be grateful. I learned to appreciate the security, to swallow my complaints, to silence the nagging voice in my head that felt so disconnected from a life that, on paper, was perfect. The anniversary party was all Julian's idea, though he framed it as a joint decision. I had pictured something intimate. Dinner at our favorite little Italian place with our closest friends, maybe a quiet getaway to the mountains where we could reconnect without an audience. But Julian was adamant. We had to celebrate at the Cypress Point Manor, the most exclusive venue in Savannah. The guest list swelled with each discussion, growing from 30 to 50, then 100. He claimed it was crucial for his business that people in our position were expected to maintain a certain image. When I gently suggested our anniversary should be about us, not his contacts, he acted wounded. He said all he wanted was to celebrate me, to show the world how proud he was of our marriage. It was a masterful move because how could I argue with that? So I spent weeks helping with the planning, even with event coordinators handling the logistics. There were endless menu tastings, debates over floral arrangements, and complex seating charts designed to navigate business rivalries I didn't understand. My mother was ecstatic, regaling her friends with tales of the lavish party her daughter was throwing, finally living the life she'd always envisioned for me. Sophie, when I told her, called it obscene but agreed to fly in, though the hesitation in her voice was palpable. The night before the party, I stood in our massive walk-in closet, staring at my reflection in the silver dress Julian had insisted on. A dizzying wave of detachment washed over me. The woman in the mirror looked like she belonged at Cypress Point Manor. She looked confident, polished, and successful. But I didn't know her. When had I stopped being Clara Vance, the school counselor who bought her jeans at Old Navy and considered a pizza night a special occasion? When did I become Clara Morgan, a real estate mogul's wife who fretted over guest lists and owned a closet full of clothes I'd never chosen? I pressed my hand to the cold glass of the mirror, searching for a flicker of my old self, and found nothing. I should have trusted that feeling. I should have listened to the alarm bells ringing in my soul, but I didn't. I smoothed down the expensive silk, practiced a smile until it felt less like a grimace, and prepared to celebrate a marriage I was about to discover was a masterfully constructed lie. The evening had started off exactly as planned, which made Julian's public demolition of our marriage feel all the more surreal. Sophie had shared funny, embarrassing stories from our college days, reminding the room of a time when I lived on instant noodles and dreamed of backpacking through Europe on a counselor's salary. Mark, Julian's business partner, gave a heartfelt toast about partnership and dedication, mentioning how Julian always credited me for keeping him grounded. My mother stood, tears welling in her eyes, and spoke of how my late father would have been bursting with pride to see me so happy, so cherished by a man who so clearly adored me. Listening to her, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe this grand, elegant party was where I was meant to be. Julian had sat beside me through it all, his hand resting reassuringly on mine, his smile radiating warmth for the guests. When he stood up to take the microphone, I expected the usual script, a lighthearted joke about my patience with his workaholic nature, a sentimental anecdote about how we met. The room fell into that hushed, expectant silence that anticipates a heartwarming moment. I was smiling up at him, the picture of a devoted wife, completely oblivious to the ambush that was seconds away. He looked directly at me, but his expression was one I'd never seen. His eyes were arctic, devoid of warmth, like a stranger's. For a horrifying second, I thought he was having a medical emergency, a stroke that was erasing his personality before my eyes. But his voice was perfectly level, projecting with the same controlled power he used in boardrooms. "Clara," he began, and the way he said my name was all wrong. It was formal, cold, stripped of 7 years of history. Then came the words that would echo in my mind for months. I wish we'd never met. The sentence hung in the air, toxic and irrevocable. My mind couldn't process it. It was a non sequitur, a line from a different play entirely. I think I even smiled, waiting for the punchline of some bizarre, cruel joke. But he just stood there, watching me, a flicker of what looked chillingly like triumph in his eyes. The silence that followed was suffocating. I heard a sharp gasp, a glass clinking as it was set down too hard. The rustle of 100 people shifting in their seats, desperate not to look at me but unable to look away. The faces in the crowd confirmed it. This was real. Sophie's hand was clamped over her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and something else I couldn't place. Mark, who had been beaming just moments before, went pale and stared at his shoes. My mother's face had drained of all color, her hand clutching at her chest as if his words had physically struck her. Julian's own father, a man who had always treated me with kindness, just closed his eyes and slowly shook his head in what looked like grim resignation. Whispers erupted like wildfire. A few people half stood, as if to intervene, but what could anyone do? The event planner stood frozen, her professional smile gone, the microphone still extended in her trembling hand. Julian simply handed it back to her. No further explanation, no apology. He walked off the stage, and the crowd parted for him, too stunned to react. He left me there, alone, the sole occupant of the wreckage he'd created, in front of 100 witnesses who would dine out on this story for years. I didn't run after him. I didn't scream. Some cold, primal survival instinct I never knew I possessed took over. I stood up slowly, deliberately smoothing my dress with hands that were miraculously steady. I turned to the room of gawking faces. "I do apologize for the interruption," I heard myself say, my voice impossibly calm. "Please, enjoy the rest of your evening." It was a completely insane thing to say, apologizing for my own public demolition, but it was the only way I could reclaim a sliver of control. I walked through that ballroom with my head held high, maintaining what little dignity I had left, past tables of guests who were now intensely fascinated by their dinner plates. I walked past the silent string quartet, past the extravagant floral displays that suddenly seemed grotesque, past the dessert bar we had so carefully selected. Sophie caught up with me in the hallway, her fingers digging into my arm. "Clara, what the hell was that? Did you know? What did he mean?" Her questions tumbled out, rapid fire. I looked at my oldest friend and realized I had no answers. "I don't know," I said, my voice flat and lifeless. "I have no idea. She offered to come home with me, but I needed to be alone. I needed to think. I'm fine," I lied. "I just need to go home." The 5-bedroom mansion felt like an intruder's house when I returned. Julian's car was gone. His phone went straight to voicemail. I walked through the silent, cavernous rooms, past the framed photos of us smiling, at our wedding, on vacation, at holiday parties. Each image was now evidence in a crime I hadn't known was being committed. I sat at the kitchen island where we'd had breakfast just that morning, where he'd kissed me goodbye and told me he couldn't wait to celebrate with me. Had he been rehearsing his speech even then? I sat there in the dark, and a thought crystallized with terrifying clarity. This wasn't a breakup. This was a strategy. He had done this in front of witnesses for a reason. He was building a narrative. By the time the first gray light of dawn crept into the kitchen, my shock had morphed into cold, focused determination. My hand was steady when I dialed Olivia's number. She answered on the second ring. "I heard," she said, her voice all business. "Sophie called me. I'm on my way." Within the hour, Olivia was sitting at my kitchen table, her leather briefcase open and a bag of bagels she knew I wouldn't eat sitting between us. I told her everything, not just about the toast, but about the last few years. The strange, late-night calls Julian would take in his locked office, the increasingly frequent business trips to places I'd never been, the way he had become so emotionally distant, his mind always somewhere else. I told her about the stacks of documents he'd asked me to sign, breezing through explanations, making me feel like I was wasting his time if I asked to read them. Olivia listened, her pen flying across a legal pad, her expression growing graver with every detail. When I was done, she looked at me with an intensity that chilled me. "Clara, a man like Julian doesn't do this unless he's either protecting something or setting up a defense for something much worse. That toast was a preemptive strike. We need to see your entire financial picture right now before he locks you out." I spent the next day transforming into a detective in my own life. I started in Julian's office, a space I'd rarely entered. The filing cabinets were unlocked, which I now realized was a sign of his supreme arrogance. I photographed everything with my phone: bank statements for accounts I never knew existed, investment portfolios in my name for properties I'd never heard of, business contracts with what looked disturbingly like my signature. I logged into our shared online accounts, screenshotting every transaction. A pattern emerged. For months, there had been systematic withdrawals of tens of thousands of dollars, all labeled as business expenses. Our joint account was nearly empty. I found property deeds for commercial real estate in my name, in cities I had never visited. I looked closer at the signatures. They were perfect forgeries. He had replicated my handwriting so flawlessly, I almost questioned my own sanity. By the third day, I knew this was far beyond a messy divorce. Olivia brought in Ben Carter, a forensic accountant she trusted. Ben was a quiet, meticulous man who looked at spreadsheets the way a scholar looks at ancient texts. He sat at my dining room table for 2 days, asking me a relentless stream of questions. Did you authorize this transfer? Do you recall signing this document? Were you aware of this business account? My answer was always the same: no. When Ben finally looked up from his laptop, his face was grim. "Mrs. Morgan, your husband has been using your identity to create shell corporations and purchase what appear to be ghost properties. The money trail is classic money laundering. He's built a criminal enterprise and he's used you as its foundation." "How long?" I whispered. Ben's answer was a gut punch. Based on the earliest documents, at least 3 years. Most of our marriage. I had to excuse myself, stumbling to the bathroom to splash cold water on my face. It all clicked into place with nauseating clarity. The anniversary toast wasn't about ending our marriage. It was about publicly discrediting me before his criminal empire imploded. When the authorities came knocking, he would have a pre-packaged story. The unstable, erratic wife. The poor, deceived husband who discovered her secret life of crime. I would be his perfect scapegoat. When I returned to the dining room, Olivia confirmed my fears. "He's establishing your unreliability as public record. When the feds find your name on everything, he'll claim he had no idea. He becomes the victim, and you become the villain." I replayed the last several years in my head, seeing everything through this horrifying new lens. The times he'd praised me for being so trusting, for not being a suspicious wife. It wasn't a compliment. He had been grooming me, training me not to look too closely. I made a decision that even surprised Olivia. I was going to disappear. Not run and hide, but strategically extract myself from the web he had woven before he could use it to drag me down with him. "That's smart," Olivia said, nodding slowly. "But we have to move fast and we have to do it by the book. Over the next few days, we executed a plan with military precision. I went to the bank and withdrew my legal 50% from our remaining joint accounts, transferring it to a new account at a different bank. It wasn't much. He'd already siphoned off the majority, but it was enough to start over. I contacted a real estate agent Olivia knew, a woman who specialized in fast, discreet sales. I listed the house. It sold in 3 days to a cash buyer. I took my half of the proceeds, nearly $250,000, and moved it to my secret account. Julian tried to call. I let it go to voicemail. He sent one text. "We need to talk about the house." Not about us, about the house. I blocked his number. My mother called constantly, frantic. I couldn't tell her the truth, not yet. How could I explain that her perfect son-in-law was a criminal who had used me as a human shield? Mom, I need you to trust me, I pleaded, exhaustion heavy in my voice. Then I took the most important step. I hired Frank Miller, a private investigator Olivia recommended. Frank was an ex-FBI agent, expensive and discreet. You need to know what he's planning next, Olivia had insisted. Frank's office was deliberately bland. He was in his 60s with a forgettable face and eyes that missed nothing. I told him the whole story. When I finished, he asked only one question. Do you want to know everything? Even the parts that will hurt? Everything, I said without hesitation. A week later, Frank had surveillance photos of Julian meeting with a man named Rico Vargas, a developer with known ties to organized crime. But he had something else, too. Something that hurt in a way the financial crimes hadn't. He had evidence of an affair. He showed me photos of Julian entering a boutique hotel with a woman I recognized instantly. Isabel Reed, a young ambitious associate from his firm. Frank had time-stamped photos of them meeting at that same hotel twice a week for over a year. He'd even recovered text messages. I read them on his laptop, each word a tiny, precise stab wound. Once Clara is out of the picture, we can finally be together for real. Isabel had texted 3 months before our anniversary. Julian's reply, it's almost done. She's too naive to ever suspect a thing. By the time she figures it out, it'll be too late. Too naive. He said it like it was a character flaw, a weakness he was entitled to exploit. I didn't cry. Instead, I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. I'm better than okay, I told a surprised Frank. I finally know exactly what I'm up against. With Frank's evidence and Ben's financial analysis, the full, monstrous scope of Julian's plan became clear. The affair and the fraud were inseparable parts of the same scheme. Isabel wasn't just his mistress. She was an active participant, helping manage the fraudulent accounts. The plan was to run the money laundering operation for as long as possible, and when the walls closed in, Julian would trigger the public implosion of our marriage, pin everything on me, and ride off into the sunset with Isabel and millions of stolen dollars. It was elegant in its absolute cruelty. I made multiple copies of every piece of evidence, storing them in different locations. One set with Olivia, one in a safe deposit box, and a third with my uncle, who accepted the sealed box without a single question. A final, complete set was uploaded to a heavily encrypted cloud server. I was no longer the trusting wife. I was building an arsenal. Olivia arranged a consultation with Eleanor Vance, a legendary former federal prosecutor. She reviewed our evidence for 3 hours in a silent conference room. When she finally looked up, her expression was grimly satisfied. "This is substantial," she said, and I felt myself breathe for the first time in weeks. "This is multi-level, federal-grade fraud. If you take this to the FBI, they will investigate. You have a stronger case file than most agents start with." She paused. "But you need to understand, once you pull this trigger, there's no going back. He will come after you. Legally, financially, and given his association with Mr. Vargas, possibly in other, more dangerous ways." The warning was clear. Was I prepared to put myself in the crosshairs? The answer came easily. "He already destroyed my life," I said quietly. "He stole my name, my trust, and my future. If I do nothing, I become the victim he tried to create. At least if I fight, I have a chance." Eleanor nodded. "Then let's make sure you're bulletproof." Over the next week, we built the case for my own innocence, a detailed timeline of the deception, character references from my principal and friends, a statement from my mother about my complete financial naivety. Documenting my own gullibility was humiliating, but also liberating. I was no longer hiding. Meanwhile, Frank's surveillance confirmed Julian was still telling everyone I'd had a breakdown, that he was worried sick. He had no idea I was building a case that could send him to prison for decades. Eleanor Vance made the call that changed everything. She had arranged a meeting for me with Special Agent Diana Hayes of the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. She's the best, Eleanor had said. She dismantles criminals who think they're untouchable. But I have to warn you, Clara, once you walk into that building, this is out of your hands. There's no turning back. I spent the days leading up to the meeting preparing myself. I was ready. For weeks, I had been living in fear, wondering if I should just take the money and run. But running meant letting him win. The morning of the meeting, I walked into the downtown federal building, pulling a rolling suitcase behind me, the kind people use for long vacations. It was filled to the brim with evidence. Agent Hayes met me in a sterile, impersonal conference room. She was in her late 40s with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through you. She had the no-nonsense air of a person who suffered no fools. "Mrs. Morgan," she said, her tone professional, "I've been briefed, but I want to hear it from you. Start from the beginning." So I did. I started with the anniversary party, the toast, the public humiliation. I laid out the discovery, the forged signatures, the ghost properties, the money laundering. Then I opened the suitcase. I laid out the documents on the long table in organized stacks. Bank statements, forged deeds, text messages, surveillance photos, Ben's accounting reports, Frank's investigation files. I had brought her Julian's entire criminal career, gift-wrapped and ready for prosecution. Agent Hayes spent 2 hours reviewing the evidence, her expression shifting from professional curiosity to serious intent. "This is extensive," she finally said. Then came the question I was dreading. "If this has been going on for 3 years, why are you only coming to us now?" I explained my journey, from humiliated wife to amateur detective, walking her through my timeline of discovery. Her skepticism was palpable. She had heard stories like this before from accomplices trying to save themselves. But as she cross-referenced my evidence, the character references, the timeline, the proof I'd immediately begun severing financial ties, her expression softened. "You could have run," she said, looking up from a document. "You took enough money to disappear." "Why didn't you?" I met her gaze. "Because he tried to erase me. He used my name, my trust, and my love to build a criminal empire, and he planned to leave me to take the fall. I want him to face real consequences, and I want to make sure no other woman ever becomes his collateral damage." She studied me for a long moment. Then she asked the final critical question. "Do you know when and where he's meeting with Vargas next?" Thanks to Frank, I did. I gave her the address of a waterfront warehouse and the time of their regular Friday meeting. She made a quick, quiet call. When she hung up, she was all business. "If we move on this, it happens fast. We'll need your testimony. The media will be all over this. Your life will become very public. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about the alternative. A life spent looking over my shoulder, a life where Julian got away with it. "I'm prepared," I said. Agent Hayes nodded once and extended her hand. Her grip was firm. "Then let's go get him." The FBI raid was a thing of terrifying efficiency. Agent Hayes' team worked all week, securing warrants and coordinating units. Julian, completely oblivious, continued his routine. Meetings with Vargas, afternoons with Isabel. He was a man who believed he held all the cards. On Friday, Frank called with an update. "They're meeting tonight. It looks big. They're moving something." I relayed the intel to Agent Hayes. She called back an hour later. "The raid is a go. Do you want to observe?" I was stunned. "Is that allowed?" "It's not standard procedure," she admitted. "But you basically handed us this case on a silver platter. I can put you in an unmarked vehicle, a safe distance away. The choice is yours." I said yes immediately. I needed to see it. That evening, I sat in a gray sedan 3 blocks from the waterfront warehouse, Agent Hayes beside me. We watched through binoculars as the sun set. At 7:15 p.m., Julian's black SUV rolled up. He stepped out with the easy arrogance of a man who believes he is untouchable. Rico Vargas arrived moments later, followed by a nervous-looking Isabel. The 3 of them entered the warehouse. All units hold. Agent Hayes whispered into her radio. Wait for my signal. The seconds stretched into an eternity. Then she spoke 2 words. Execute warrant. It was like watching a movie. Unmarked cars materialized, blocking every escape route. SWAT teams swarmed the building. The entire property was locked down in under 30 seconds. My hands were shaking as I watched through the binoculars. A few minutes later, they emerged. Julian was in handcuffs, his face a mask of disbelief, rapidly collapsing into pure terror as he registered the scale of the operation. Vargas was stone-faced. Isabel was sobbing, her makeup streaking down her face. As the SUV carrying Julian passed our position, I saw his face clearly through the window. He looked small, pathetic, stripped of his power. He was no longer the master of the universe. He was just a criminal in cuffs. Agent Hayes turned to me. "How do you feel?" she asked gently. I expected to feel triumphant, vindicated. Instead, a different word came out, empty. She nodded, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. "Justice isn't healing," she said quietly. "It's just the beginning. The hard work starts now." The media storm was immediate and intense. The narrative Julian had so carefully crafted about the unstable wife vaporized overnight. My phone lit up with texts from people who had pitied me, now apologizing profusely. Sophie flew in, racked with guilt. "I should have known," she cried. My mother came to my apartment, her face etched with regret. "I thought you were so lucky," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry." I held her, realizing she was a victim of his deception too. The legal process was a marathon that consumed the next 3 months. I gave depositions where Julian's lawyers tried to paint me as a willing accomplice. I sat through court appearances, feeling his hateful stare from across the room. Isabel, facing serious charges, cooperated fully with the prosecution, providing an insider's view that sealed Julian's fate. Through it all, I refused to be the broken victim he wanted me to be. I dressed in simple, professional clothes. I answered every question with calm clarity. Olivia was my rock through the entire ordeal. "You know what real revenge is?" she told me late one night. "It's living well. It's building a life they can no longer touch. That's the only victory that matters." The verdicts were swift. Vargas got 15 years. Isabel got 5. And Julian was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. I attended the sentencing. As the marshals led him away, he looked back at me one last time, searching my face for something. Tears, anger, triumph. I gave him nothing. I looked at him as if he were a complete stranger because that's what he was. The man I married had never really existed. I had been in love with a character he played. After the sentencing, I walked out of the courthouse and into the sunlight, feeling a weight I didn't even know I was carrying begin to lift. Within a week, I decided to leave Savannah. I moved across the country to Seattle, legally changed my name back to Clara Vance, and reclaimed the identity he had tried to steal. I found a job writing grants for a nonprofit that helps women escape abusive situations. The irony was not lost on me, but the work felt meaningful. It gave purpose to my pain. My new life was quiet. My colleagues knew nothing of my past. I was just Clara, a woman who liked to take long walks by the water, slowly learning what real peace felt like. 6 months into my new life, a letter arrived, forwarded from Olivia's office. It was from Julian, written on prison stationery. He didn't apologize. He blamed me for destroying his life, for betraying him by going to the FBI. It was a masterpiece of self-pity. I read it once, felt nothing but a distant pity for him, and then I burned it in my kitchen sink. I washed the ashes down the drain, and with them, the last remnant of him in my life. My mother and I talk every Sunday now. Our conversations are real, stripped of pretense. She asks if I'm happy, and I tell her the truth. I'm getting there. Happiness wasn't a prize I won the day he was convicted. It's something I'm building piece by piece in a life that is finally, irrevocably, my own. The revenge was never about watching his world burn. The revenge was surviving the fire and building a new world from the ashes, one he could never touch. If this story of justice and resilience kept you captivated until the very end, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Clara walked into that FBI office with a suitcase full of evidence, taking control of her own story. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more powerful stories of courage and transformation like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. End of story.